So let's start with topic one, general trends in e-commerce. Uh, Apologies in advance. Here's our obligatory COVID slide. We're in 2020, so we're just doing it. But relevant to e-commerce, there is a lot of insight. This was from an IBM research report around the acceleration of e-commerce related to the pandemic. There's a lot of things that I think probably from your own personal life that make sense that are kind of translating to a larger macro e-commerce environment around one, at least temporarily, less of a reliance on department stores or physical locations, right? As shelter in place happens, we're kind of all waiting to see how long that duration lasts, but we're certainly feeling it now in the moment. Two, a lot of local businesses pushing online, right? Trying to recover some of that lost foot traffic that they might have, or just, hopping onto e-commerce for the first time, trying to catch some of that revenue. And third, not trying to dismiss the physical locations altogether, but really seeing how e-commerce can play an important part of reevaluating your physical footprint, right? So if you think not to keep talking Minnesota things, I live very close to a Target, and they have now you can drive up and they'll drop the goods in your trunk on your way out. So again, an interaction I can initiate online, purchase all of my groceries, stop there, pick it up, and be on my way. Definitely a lot of things that maybe we weren't accustomed to doing, but are becoming increasingly so, especially in 2020.
Yeah, Jeff, and I can say that what we've seen in the e-commerce space or from an agency side is that a lot of customers that have focused more on retail have now been forced to focus on their e-commerce side.
Yeah.
And I think that there some of them that, and especially maybe ones that are not in the US that relied heavily on their e-commerce space, have now had to pivot to e-commerce, and that is giving them a really good, not only a wake-up call, but just a good idea of what is to come in e-commerce, and how that relates to how their online experience works compared to their in-store experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the European point is a really good one. We tend to see those with companies, not trying to mention names, that have like a rich legacy or heritage, might have existed for a while, that have really honed in on that in-person experience. So a lot of that transformation we're seeing too at Sift is just, like you said, how do you translate that to an online environment if that's your first touch point, right? Like how do you have that kind of concierge-y feel, that real customization when you're interacting with a slab of electronics there. Excellent. Next, not surprisingly, this is a pretty fast follow from pushing to e-commerce. Delivery and shipping is really having a moment. So when you think about your business, understanding and controlling, the logistics side of the house will come really important too. We're especially seeing demand being driven in residential, more suburban areas. Again, places where normally I might have gone to a store, but now, that's something I'm more inclined to get to my porch or my mailbox. Again, we're heading into a traditionally heavy time anyways, when you think about, the holiday season and, I don't even know what day Amazon Prime Day is. It's like really early this year. And we're also seeing kind of large institutional players keep moving to this delivery space. So you imagine a lot of the industry will follow. Just this week, Walmart Plus launched, right? So when you think about those on-demand groceries, gadgets, anything they're willing to send you, people are really making this an increasing part of their life of get it to me directly as opposed to me going to you to tailor that. So e-commerce plays a really nice role here as well.
Yeah, and I think if we think about from the retailer side, what it used to be for fraud protection, and I know you're going to get into more of the fraud protection soon, but
Yeah.
Not to date myself, but I was a waiter back when I was in college, and we had a big book full of credit card numbers that were stolen.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how we did our fraud protection. So if somebody gave me an Amex card to pay for their meal, we had to go back to this book, look up the number, and see if it existed in this book. Like, can you imagine? Like, then I never actually got anybody that had a stolen credit card, but what do you do then? It's like, oh, geez, this person at this table has a card in this book. So, fraud protection has been around a long time, but certainly it's become more sophisticated. And I think merchants especially have to think about it's not always like in their in-store, they have to think about the same thing for their web store.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Hopefully they gave you some tips on how you were supposed to address a customer if you actually found them in the book. I can't imagine how that conversation would have gone.
Yeah,
But
they gave me a big bucket of cold water and I just had to throw it on.
maybe a little note, please leave. Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. A lot of, like, we're going to talk about digital trust and safety in like 3 slides. But really, the way I like to express that, it's really an evolution of things you may be aware of as a loss prevention standpoint, right? So Brent's book, or physical security, someone you're used to seeing in a storefront, digital trust and safety is really an analog for that in a digital environment. So you don't have to lose that concept, like the concept of checking for known bad credit cards or looking for suspicious behaviors like in a physical location. You kind of want to mirror that online. So I think it's a really great point and something we try to push people to consider, especially if they're new to the e-commerce space or they're spinning up a new website and they're just starting to take their first online sales. Third, this is our last bullet on e-commerce, but I think everyone kind of thinks about, how your day is constructed, especially this year. There's probably a lot more if not like chaos, there's just a lot of more stuff on your mind. And we're also seeing this reflected in how people tend to purchase. So, it's in between, a call and maybe a meeting you have to take, or maybe attending a webinar. Maybe a little on the nose. But, really having that availability of like a traditional www site or a mobile commerce site can be really important. And again, not surprisingly, things that probably make sense to a rational person, speed and convenience, really important here. Brent, I know you had mentioned maybe from your experience, progressive web apps are starting to get more mind share with folks and kind of can fit in here.
Yeah, and hold on, I'm just finishing my checkout on Amazon. I was just multitasking. No, I'm completely joking, of course. Yeah, so as the market matures for commerce, and even as we look at external markets, especially emerging markets, we are seeing that sometimes certainly in the US, the whole in-store thing has been skipped. We went right to commerce. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing desktop is being skipped. So the idea of being convenient in the time is super important, and how you deal with that workflow with the user, getting that user to buy something when they're online, and then giving them that great checkout experience. And I know you're going to get to this, Jeff, but that when you as a merchant, you want to know that that is a good buyer and that you feel comfortable shipping that product. Not to date myself again, but I was doing e-commerce in like 1996, mm-hmm. and I just remember times of like, we would get an order for computers, and it would be sort of like, oh, I got an order that came in. It was, and at the time we didn't have a shopping cart, but you get this order that says, oh, can you ship $25,000 of computers to Nigeria? I'm like, let's check into this a little bit. Yeah, so that same thing is happening now, and it's happening faster and bigger.